It is Friday, December the 17th, 2021. And as you all know, that was the week.
It
Me and
was.
Keith are here to discuss the latest developments in technology, how it's reshaping the world, quite literally, the future of the world, Keith. No,
Exactly.
really, meaning that the future of the world is actually being changed by technology. Surprise, surprise. What's the core, the central editorial this week, Keith?
Actually, it's a theme this is probably the last show we'll do this year, by the way, Andrew. I think we'll take a couple of weeks off. But
Oh, good.
so this is, our version of the Economist double issue, looking back over the year. And fortunately for us, Foreign Affairs magazine published 3 pieces this week, which are themes we've been talking about pretty much the whole year.
Yeah.
Um, uh, they basically published 3 pieces. One is called Great Protocol Politics, and it's a reply to 2 other pieces, The Technopolar Moment and Big Tech Won't Remake the Global Order. And all 3 articles are asking the question, what are the institutions that are going to dominate the future of governance and decision making and power? And so we've talked about these things quite a bit on the show, and I thought it was only appropriate that we should give credit where credit's due to Foreign Affairs for highlighting this debate. And I wrote my editorial about it, and we got a chance to discuss it.
Yeah, and Parag Khanna is an old friend of mine. I actually heard him talk in San Francisco. I think it was last month. He was on my Keenon show to talk about his latest book on move and the mobility of contemporary the contemporary worker. He is one of the co-authors of the more, I think, the most interesting piece, the protocol nations and companies in foreign policy. His other co-author was the original CTO at Coinbase, Keith.
Yes, absolutely. So he knows what he's talking about when it comes to protocols and DAOs. And
So what are these guys saying? What are Parag and who's the co-author? I'm not going to pronounce his name. You're better with Indian names than I am.
The co-author's name is Balaji. I'm going to get that right. Srinivasan.
Very good. So what are Srinivasan and Parag Khanna? What are they saying that you and I haven't been saying this year? Or you haven't been saying? I just asked the questions.
The first thing is they're saying the 21st century won't belong to China or the US, which, okay,
well,
that's
you kind of say that, right?
Yeah, although I do think China is more important than the US in the 21st century. So I probably wouldn't go as far as they go, because I think there's an intermediate stage where China is very important. But they say the most important reason for that is the rise of decentralized protocols like Bitcoin and Ethereum that are controlled by neither states nor companies. That's basically the core thesis.
It's interesting that Parag has co-authored this piece, because his book before last was The Future is Asian, which suggests that it's not so much China, but Taiwan and Korea and Singapore and Thailand and India where the future lies.
And Indonesia as well. Yeah.
So he's got some interest. Parag, I think, is a geostrategic thinker, but he's a sort of philosopher of geography or of contemporary geography.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think those are binary opposites. I think if you were to roll out the next 100 years in a line and draw on that line roughly when you think things are going to happen, there's going to be some Asian decades along that line. The question is whether world systems, let's call them broadly speaking, of which protocols are a part, the internet is a part, money movements are a part, whether those world systems become more important than any nation state, including big ones.
And I think infrastructure isn't going. I mean, the physical, for better or worse, isn't going away. So it's whether countries like Singapore are better suited mentally and geographically and economically to prospering in this new world.
Yeah, financial centers actually become free of the normal constraints of geography and history. And that in itself is interesting. The biggest dilemma, and a lot of my former colleagues would focus in on this, is we human beings tend to control, insofar as it's possible, to our lives through institutions that are close to us, the nation state being the most distant, and city states and local governments being closer, and school boards being even closer still. And there is an argument that the increasing irrelevance of the nation state equals the erosion of democracy, because you can't have democracy when the institutions are so
Yeah, and I think Parag is not convinced. He would never admit this, but I don't think he's much of a Democrat. I think his ideal form of government is actually technocracy, and I think this new system lends itself to technocracies like Singapore. I mean, China isn't really a technocracy, or if it is, it's a highly authoritarian type. So what we need, what this system seems to sort of benefit, or most the political systems most suited to this new world, are sort of moderate or gentle technocracies, I think.
Well, I think that might be an easy way to understand it when looking forward from today, because we can only look at the future with the tools we have in the present, and so we tend to paint the picture in present colors, if you like. But it's interesting. As part of the research for this, I went and looked at the history of the nation state.
You hate the nation. Let's be clear here, Keith. Every conversation we have about this, you're always writing the obituary of the nation state because you want it done. You think it's a disaster. Admit it.
It's funny because it depends when we're talking. I love the nation state compared to the feudal predecessors, and I hate it compared to what I think a modern world would look like. So I both love it and I hate it at the same time. And I
A bit
certainly
of
wouldn't want
the bit of the Hegelian Marx there, Keith, is there?
yeah, and I wouldn't want to let it go for a technocracy. I would want to let it go for a better global system that gives people a combination of control, and freedom. And
And
that's
there's
a
not much evidence of that. That for all the smoke, for all the excitement and perhaps the smoke and mirrors of the can of peace, um, I don't know any. There's no evidence for a global democracy, how it would work, how it would operate, how it would run, who would finance it. It's just hard to imagine.
the only people who've imagined it are in science fiction novels, and there are some good ones where there's credible ideas. Um,
Mm.
uh, for Us, the Living is my favorite, which I've forgotten the author's name now. It was a long lost sci-fi novel that's recently been republished, and it's set in 2083, following the death of a person in 1939, and the novel was written in 1939.
So
And
it's a
this
bit Orwellian in it, in the sense that it went from like Orwell wrote in 1980, in 1948 for 1984.
Yeah, he went from 39 to 2083. And what's really interesting is there's a flat screen on every wall where anyone can be broadcast into anyone's room,
Yeah, well,
which you
that's a
already
bit
imagine.
old fashioned now, right? We're almost getting beyond that.
And, and decision making, money was distributed globally to everyone in the form of tokens. And people could earn more tokens by entertaining each other. There was all kinds of stuff that it seems very valid. Star Trek's another sci-fi which, ignoring the Starship Enterprise, just look at the political system. It's completely nationless, and as far as
Yeah,
one
but it
can tell.
requires aliens. The point about Star Trek and is that it's the world. It's nation state competition and violence in an interstellar context. So it's not really that different.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean by we always paint the future in the colors of the present, because if you're living in a nation state war-torn world during Vietnam and you're writing Star Trek, it's going to be war with aliens, because you can't imagine peace.
What
Uh,
about so what you're imagining, or what these people? I mean, I'm not sure if Parag. I don't want to put him into a. I won't paint him too simplistically, but what these visionaries are imagining is the world organized like a DAO. Is that fair?
Yeah, and that implies that both nation states and big companies, even the biggest companies, are too small compared to what's being built. What's being built will dwarf. And with this week, crypto reached $3 trillion of value, and
Yeah.
it's not under anyone's control, and it's running on systems that are not under anyone's control. So there's already evidence that something's happening here.
Oh, something definitely. I mean, this is not just business as usual. What about the other two pieces in foreign policy? What are they saying that to
Well,
counter this idea of the world as some DAO in the future?
they both take their own side. One of them, the technopolar moment, is basically talking about
Who wrote
how
that?
it's written by. Let's pull it up, and I'll. Uh, Sometimes I reverse the names. Ian Bremmer wrote
Right. Who
it,
again has been on my show. I know Ian quite well.
and it says
Geo-strategic thinker.
how digital powers will reshape the global order is the subtitle. So he is focused on modern nation states, especially the US, as having unfair advantage against analog powers, let's call them, less advanced powers.
Yeah.
And then the other one, big tech won't remake the global order, is written by Stephen Walt.
Yeah, an old,
WALT.
sort of an international relations expert from a more traditional the vertical world of political science.
Yeah. So basically, Bremer's saying that Facebook, Apple, Google, Amazon, and foreign counterparts such as Alibaba, Huawei, and Tencent have become powerful autonomous actors that are increasingly shaping geopolitics. And Walt says, "Wait a minute, that's not right." And he's more looking at nation states as being the dominant ones, not what he calls national champions.
So Parag and his co-author, they sort of cherry pick some of the arguments from both sides, or are they completely different?
They're completely different. They're saying any centralized institution, whether it's a
Right.
nation state or a company, will be powerless against protocols and these distributed autonomous organizations.
So basically, Bremer and Walt are saying the same thing, that power will continue to exist, but Bremer's saying it will be big tech,
Companies,
and
yeah,
Walt's saying it's the old nation state, and Parag's saying it's entirely different.
correct.
Interesting.
Correct. Now, and what the point I make in the editorial is it's pointless to pick a winner here, even if you think there is one. And if I were to pick a winner, it would be Parag and Srinivasan. But the most important point is that they're even talking about it. The fact
Yeah.
that these highly intelligent people are debating it means it's an open question.
So we have someone in the audience asking Keith to share the link. Can you put the link up on the screen?
If they go to thatwastheweek.com, the links are all there in the top article. So if you just go to thatwastheweek.com, you'll see the top article, and the links are all in the editorial and down below.
So Ian Bremmer, again, an old friend of mine. I've debated with him. I've had him on my show. He's a very smart guy. He's warning about the continuing power of big tech. And one of the pieces you talk about, Keith, this week is that Apple can grow much bigger. I mean, it's already big enough. What is it, a $2 trillion company?
Nearly 3 now.
Nearly 3. You remember when being a $1 trillion company was a big deal?
That's like
Can
a
it
week.
get up to 5 or 10 trillion? What comes after trillion, by the way? What happens if you have 1,000 trillion? What do you become?
Isn't it? Isn't that somebody correct us from the audience in the chat, but I think it's a quadrillion. But I could be wrong about it.
That's science fictional. Once we get,
When I was a kid, I would have said a zillion.
yeah, well, whatever it is, it's a lot.
But this
Um,
this is an article about it's math about the Apple car, and electronic vehicles are selling at the low end $45,000, at the high end $150,000 and above. And they do some math on if Apple sold 100,000 cars, assuming they understand roughly what it would cost Apple to make a car. And they make the point that Apple is a small company compared to what it would become if it went ahead and did that. They make a lot of other points as well, but that's one of the points they make. And that's absolutely accurate, because The way that companies get valued is as a multiple of their revenue. If Apple's selling 100,000 things that are worth, let's say $100,000 each, that is a very big number. Multiply that by the multiple that Apple trades at, it's 10 times that. So a $3 trillion company ends up being quite a small company compared to the global opportunity that electric vehicles um, show you.
Is this Apple car, is it going to be a self-driving car? Because it needs to be radical. And if it's just another EV, I don't know what's radical about that. I mean, Tesla already have essentially an iPhone on wheels. I don't
Yeah,
know how much more iPhone-ish Apple could make it.
nobody really knows, but the rumors are that that they're contemplating not having a steering wheel at all. So it'd be like getting on a train and
Well, I
trying to.
understand if a friend of my wife has the new Tesla S, and apparently that only has half a steering wheel. So Tesla's onto this. You imagine that Musk is as smart as anyone at Apple. He understands where they're going, and he will be well positioned when they come out with whatever vehicle they have.
Right,
Do you
right.
think that this could be their Rubicon, their
Apple.
their Stalingrad?
Well, look, Tesla is at the end of its dominant period. There are now
You
really.
think we heard that about Apple? I mean,
Well, I'm not saying the end of being a big, successful company. It's the end of its dominant period where it has no competition. Now there are really good electric vehicles. The EQS from Mercedes, which is priced at the same price as a Model S Plaid, so that 120,000. Then there's the Mach-E from Ford, which is a Mustang branded electric vehicle that's selling really well. They just decided to triple production of those. Then you've got Audi with a really good electric
are you
vehicle.
shopping, Keith, for one?
I am always on the edge of pressing buy to all kinds of things. And so far, at least, I haven't pushed the button. But the answer probably is yes.
I hope nobody's going to shoot up your new electric vehicle.
That's a reference to something we can't talk about. So we'll moving rapidly along.
Keith has a checkered history when it comes to organized mob violence.
Yeah.
Moving along, poor creators and rich creators. We've talked about this before, and I think this article actually supports what I'm saying, that you've always been, again, an idealist when it comes to the creative economy opening up. I've always said, well, these tools are only compounding inequality. Am I right? Or is the latest evidence suggest that I'm right?
Um, well, this article, which I think is an extremely good article, there's actually two, and they kind of take opposite sides. The first one is about the distribution of wealth in a creator economy. This graph is how many creators, in quotes, there are year by year, and it shows a sudden spike in the number of creators. And then he goes on to look at, how many of those creators can make money. And this is music production. If I zoom in, maybe we
Yeah.
can see it. And who gets the over 100 million to a billion streams is nobody. Who gets between 10 and 100 billion streams is 110 artists. And basically, to get to any kind of numbers, let's say over 100,000, they're only getting 1,000 streams or less, which means
Yeah.
they're not making
So it's
money.
the end of the I mean, this is something I've written about for years. It's really the end of the creative middle class. If you're lucky enough to be at the top, you're going to get rich and famous. And then there's a huge long tail, which isn't really even a long tail because it's totally unfunded. There's no revenue. And then there's nothing in between.
Yeah, basically hobbyists. It's
Yeah.
hobbyists or wealthy people. Bruce Springsteen just sold his entire catalog to Sony for $500 million,
Yeah.
and he's a creator. I don't know how much we'd get for all the back catalog of That Was the Week, Andrew, but I suspect it wouldn't pay for one meal between the two of us.
Well,
So
and quite rightly, when it comes to Bruce Springsteen's output, it's remarkable. I mean, actually, Dylan got less than 500 million, which surprises me because I think Dylan's output's worth more than Springsteen. But
Yeah. Now
that's a complicated debate.
there was another side. This is an article about a woman in Mexico who is making money from being a life coach. And it talks about how she abandoned Facebook, where she would have made next to nothing. And she used a lot of the services that are available now if you're a standalone creator. And she started doing her classes for about $90 per class for a 6-class program, actually. So it's $90 for 6 classes. And she made $430,000 last year.
Well, life coaching is an important component in our new culture of therapy. So that's good. So at least maybe that's the new middle class. They'll replace the old creative middle class. You have a link for metaverse thinking. I didn't know there was any thinking in the metaverse, Keith.
Yeah, this there's a fight right now over the definition of metaverse by everybody.
Surprise. Yeah, because I mean, Facebook was a land grab. I mean, it's like, I don't know, Microsoft changing their name in 1998 to the internet.
Yeah. So if you look at this is from Coinbase, CEO Brian Armstrong,
Yeah.
Commenting on a report that a member of his team made about what the relationship is between Web 2, Web 3, and the metaverse. And Coinbase is making the point, and it's really very well illustrated here. It's making the point that the metaverse is impossible right now, but should it ever exist, it will come after Web 3. And it will rely on all these foundational things that in black at the bottom here that will support things like identity services, entitlement services, ownership of stuff, payments, communications, history. And on top, we're going to socialize, work, transact, play, and create. And he thinks lots of companies will contribute to this platform in the same way that lots of companies contribute to the internet. I thought it was a fantastic thought piece. I really thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back in 2012, 2013, when the cloud was becoming boringly ubiquitous, at least in a conceptual sense. I used to say to people, what comes after the cloud? And this is basically what he's imagining, Armstrong.
Yeah, and he's also positioning Coinbase as being part of it.
Surprise, surprise, right?
Yeah. He's converging crypto and blockchain with metaverse, AR, and VR, and making the point that AR and VR are just ways of joining it.
Right. But it also, I think, reflects the fact that whatever we think or say about Zuckerberg, he's a smart guy and he knows exactly the stakes here. And what he's doing is right. Maybe he chose the wrong word, but what he's doing with Facebook is the correct thing to do.
Yeah, there's a kind of a joke here as well, though, Andrew. A few weeks ago, we talked about the motivation behind metaverse being to escape the constraints of the smartphone, where Zuckerberg doesn't own the platform. And if he could own the platform, he'd be in a stronger position. Well, what Armstrong is saying is, Mark, forget it. You're never going to own the platform because the platform is distributed and owned by lots of people. And so in a way,
so the platform is a DAO essentially.
Yeah. So
even the word platform, which is in vogue now, it's a Web 2.0 word.
Yeah.
For Web 3, there's a new word. We think of it as a platform, but we need new language because it's such a radically different world.
Correct. And so he's actually closest to Parag and Balaji.
Yeah. Surprise. Well, the guy's the CTO, the original CTO at Coinbase.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're all thinking along the same lines. Here's the big question, Keith. In this Web3 world of distributed platforms, of DAOs, are we still going to go into the office?
Well, according to this week's survey, the answer is maybe not. Omicron in the office. Well, firstly, the information has started an office tracker, which tells you that they've got nothing better to write about. But who's going back to the office at least half the time, flexibly, undecided, or is going remote? And they've got a little grid there that shows you in the top right, everyone's remote. in the bottom left, they want to return, but they're going to make it flexible. And the top left, they really want to return, but they're saying half the time for now.
Why do you think big tech companies are not laying down the law in terms of coming back to the office, in contrast with big Wall Street firms? Is it because the big tech companies are fearful of losing good people if they insist that? Because it's in the company's interest for people to get back into the office, especially since they have significant investment in real estate. And the Wall Street companies have insisted on it and seem to have got away with it. But big tech seems much more ambivalent, much more nervous. Do you think this because they fear people will just walk and find another big tech company that allows them to work from home?
Yeah, it's a competitive hiring market, and I think a lot of employees will be attracted to the ability to work remotely, and so will favor working for those companies. So you're going to lose talent if you're not flexible. Whereas Wall Street is much more of a centralized regime with normal controls over presence and such. It's basically fascism versus anarchy in terms of styles. So I think the Bay Area is more anarchy, and the East Coast is more fascism with the small f.
And where are Austin and Miami in all this? Irrelevant, I hope.
Pretty irrelevant. I mean,
Good.
Miami's getting a lot of news, but I don't think that's a real thing.
So here's a prediction, Keith. In this new DAO world, which is clearly, we won't go to the office. What I think will come is everyone will say, oh, everyone can live in the countryside. Everyone will be more distributed. The reality is it's only going to make cities more valuable, real estate more valuable. San Francisco, New York, London, Berlin. And in that context, even farming is migrating to the city. That's your startup of the week, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm obviously totally conflicted on this one, but Infarm announced yesterday that it has raised $200 million at a valuation north of $1 billion, led by the Qatar Investment Authority. Obviously, in the Middle East, they're food challenged, and so growing food in the cities is a big deal there. And
especially in Qatar, when it's going to be the World Cup next year, they're going to need to not only feed everyone, but give them beer if they're allowed to drink.
Correct. So Infarm's, big ambition. Erez Golonska is nothing if not ambitious. They do 75 varieties of greens right now. They want to move into strawberries, mushrooms, root vegetables, and all kinds of stuff in the years ahead. A bit like Amazon with its warehouses, Infarm is a capital-intensive business that makes a lot of money at scale, but has to spend a lot of money to get there. So raising money is part of life if you're at Infarm. That's how you grow. And then you turn that money into production facilities in cities, and you grow food.
What happens if, and this again seems relatively inevitable, that the in-farms of the world will become increasingly central to our food production? What happens to the countryside? What happens to the fields? What happens to the Midwest, the so-called flyover territory in America? Does it become even more irrelevant, even more of a footnote to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think urbanization and suburbia around urban centers accelerates even more than it already has. It was always a trending from the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution onwards. We've never stopped urbanizing. The world hasn't. And, we're pretty fully urbanized in America, despite the existence of the Midwest. We're very urbanized.
Whenever you have these super city states, Singapore, San Francisco, Berlin, able not only to run the world economy, but feed themselves.
Feed themselves with fresh greens, at least, fruits, mushrooms, root vegetables, obviously not everything.
But as meat become replaced anyway with vegetables, is this one also fixed to global warming? We get rid of cows, which are one of the main reasons for global warming.
Well, I'm a big believer in cow meat, so I'm not going to go there because I like cow meat.
What do you mean believer? You mean you
I like the taste of steak.
Is that your church, the Church of Cow Meat?
The Church of the Khan, the Khane. Definitely. But getting rid of the transport and logistics and refrigeration needs of remotely grown food is a huge plus for the world, for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
is there any downside to the infarms of the world, apart from making the countryside even more irrelevant, making more and more angry populists?
I don't think there's a downside to, if you think about vertical farming, just the logic of the math. For every square meter of growing, you stack it in layers. You can turn every square meter into n square meters. So you can take way less space, flat space on the earth for growing lots of food. And the food grows faster. So the number of crops you get in vertical farming compared to the sun and the air and the land is about, it depends on the crop, but it's between 3 and 10x the number of crops as well as the space usage. So it uses LED lighting, which is inexpensive. It uses hydroponic water, so it doesn't suck up lots of water. It doesn't use chemicals, so there's no negative
Now, as
impact.
you say, Keith, you are conflicted. You are a major investor in Infarm. So if they win, you win. You're going to become horribly rich, even richer than you already are. You can buy 2 or 3 EVs of these new types.
Why would I do that though? I mean,
You wouldn't? Could
we
buy
can
one
all,
for Janae, 3 for the boys.
Janae, my wife, listeners, her dad kept the same car for like 20 years. If I even think about buying a new car, she hits me.
Well, you like being hit by Janae, don't you?
Don't go there. Do not go there. In
Well,
this,
finally, Keith, we won't go there. Tweet of the week. What's our tweet of the week this week?
well, it's back to the inability of big things to control, because what we have is a small soccer team called Bedford City, or Real Bedford, as it says here, has been acquired by a Bitcoin millionaire called Peter McCormack. Twitter hand Peter McClasso, but his handle is Peter McCormack, so who knows what his real name is. He has bought his childhood hometown club, Bedford, and his intent, as it shows here, on taking it from this rung, the bottom orange that you can't really see, the South Midlands League Division 1, through the Premier League, the Southern League Central Division, the Premier Division, the National League South, the National League, the English Football League 2, League 1, the Championship, all the way to the Premier League. That's his goal. And he's bought his childhood club, and his plan is to, over many seasons, because in England, if you win your league, you get promoted to the league above. And there's no end to that. You can go all the way to the top if you're good enough. He wants to turn his club into that. And he's bought it using Bitcoin from the former owner. So that's the first. And I thought that
It's
was,
interesting. We get that. But then in the end, even if he gets his team up, even if he gets Bedford up to the Premier League, which it won't be the Premier League, it'll be some sort of European league, they'll still turn out to be Burnley or Norwich or Brentford. They're never going to become Manchester United or Liverpool or Manchester City or Chelsea, who, again, in this winner take all economy, are growing farther apart from everyone else.
yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. I think, we could have a whole show on the way in which sports rights are sold and who benefits and who doesn't, but and what the impact of streaming and digital development could be on that. We still live in a world that's 50 to 100 years old when it comes to these rights. The way it works is there's a league, they own the rights, they sell the rights to big TV channels around the world, and we get to watch the games by paying the big TV stations who sell advertising against it. In that pie, about 9/10 of the money attracted by the game goes to the TV stations who sell the ads,
Well,
and only
speaking of
about
pies, Keith, that's what generations of football fans have been fed on. Last week I was in London. I went to Spurs a couple of times. We're supposed to have, we don't have a very sophisticated team. We have a good manager, but we do have a highly sophisticated stadium, which has its own brewery, remarkable restaurant, especially in comparison to the past. Is the future of football in farms within football grounds?
Oh, every restaurant's going to grow its own, basil, parsley, thyme, everything. Why wouldn't it? You can buy a growing unit now with 11 trays that can produce regular crops for about 5,000 euros.
So,
So
so
it's
in terms of radical disruption, as TechCrunch always likes to say, the food business is about to be even more radically
decentralized.
decentralized or turned upside down, or as media and banking. And is this going to come through new
No, it will.
technologies like InFarm?
It will. I mean, InFarm will have a series of products. It already has. You can buy the actual crop, so you can go and buy basil. You could buy a growing unit that is the right size for a small store, or more than one, and plug them together. You'll be able to buy something called an in-farm growing center, which has uh, capacity for acre farms. Each machine is an acre, and you can have 30 of those acres in a building. It's called an IGC, an in-farm growing center. So governments will be able to go to in-farm and provision entire growing centers for cities. So everything from soup all the way through to the
Soup to
production process.
nuts.
Yeah.
And are InFarm doing any of these deals with restaurants yet?
Yeah. Oh,
The
yeah.
restaurant entrepreneurs?
That's how they started, actually. They started small and grew small units that could fit in a store. If you go to
So
Canada,
we got a sort of a Santa Cruz Networks opportunity of them becoming a B2B platform for
oh, they
in
will.
farming.
B2C, B2B, and B2Country even.
Wow. Well, it's all happening, Keith.
Yeah.
That was the week for December the 17th. We need to save some good stuff for dessert. We're not going to get to dessert for a couple of weeks. When are we next going to do the show?
We'll next do the show at the end of the first week of January, which, if I get my calendar up, I can tell you is Friday, the 7th of January.
Friday the 7th of January. I'm actually traveling to Costa Rica, so we may have to do it on Thursday the 6th.
That would be fine. We'll
Well,
we'll
Happy
let
New
everyone
Year,
know.
Keith. You and I will talk before the holidays and the New Year, but Happy New Year to all our loyal viewers. It was a great year. I think for that was the week. 2021 was a good year for you and I as well, and we hope that 2022 will be even better.
Yes, we do. Thank you, everyone. Bye, Andrew.
Bye.